Dr. Jazz.
You're playing for such a long time with either your stuff and with David as well, obviously. I mean, I've been such a fan of his music and Cecil but I want to start with your own stuff. I listen on YouTube. Your last recordings are at least what I have. Your last stuff is like from 2015 or something. But like I think on YouTube I saw really recent footage of some new bands that you've been doing, and I want to start with this stuff. What's there's like a bass, 2 saxophone quartet, and of course your regular band, the Slipstream.
I have my regular band. Yeah, I have my regular band, which is Slipstream Time Travel, and that began not long after I finished doing the album Time and Space Volume 1, and that was released. I think we recorded that in '93, and it was released a year later. So it's around 95 or 96 when I began using the term Slipstream time travel, because I picked it up from the TV show Andromeda. But Slipstream was also mentioned on the newest Star Trek series, which was on Voyager. And I think it was mentioned later on in another series as well. And I was fascinated by the term, and I said, maybe I should use that as a title. But Slipstream by itself didn't cut it for me. So I added time travel, and that name has caught on. Yeah.
And what's, these new groups, are you going to record this stuff, or it has already been recorded?
They may be recorded at some point. One of the new groups that you probably saw recently was a set I did at Freddie's Barr, which is way out in Brooklyn. And that's with Danny Kimmon.
That's an awesome one.
James McCain. Danny set that up. He had gotten in touch with me the previous year, last year, and we did a set at Stephen Gaussi's music series, which he used to host at the Bushwick Public House. But unfortunately that series came to an end. But anyway, that was the first time we did it. And then Danny's been coming here, like every year that he comes, he will ask to work with me. And this was our latest edition this year. So it's a lot of fun working with these guys. And it's really quite remarkable, because there was a period for many years where a lot of musicians did not want to work with me. My journey was somewhat similar to Cecil Taylor. There was a period when people, when they heard his name, they would laugh out loud and stuff like that. They say, "Oh, you don't want to be involved with that cat. He said he can't play the piano." But now Cecil persisted in doing this particular way of playing, that he's actually he's extended the vocabulary of the piano, merging the classical and the jazz together, because I hear a little of both. I've had the pleasure of seeing Andre Watts one time, many, many years after he had done a set at Avery Fisher Hall. And this was back in February of 1985, and it aired on public TV. And I was blown away by his performance. And for some reason, I didn't get to see him until like 2017 or 2018 at the Kaufman Music Center, which is in Midtown. So Andre did his recital, and he was playing, he was much older, but the last piece, he saved the best for last. And I tell people, I don't know what that was. It sounded to my ears like it was classical, and it sounded like it was improvised. I said, that what he did in that one piece totally eclipsed what he had done back in 1985. And I think that's what blew me away, that he been able to maintain a consistently high level of playing. And because not many cats can do that, because usually when cats get older, they have health issues or the body doesn't cooperate for one reason or another. So I've always been mindful of lifestyle, and I took an interest in health. Even when I was very young, you know, my mom used to give us vitamins, and I didn't like taking vitamins. I would spit them out when she wasn't looking. So I began to do some research on my own, and I came into that by way of my brother. My brother's name was Craig, and Craig had discovered Prevention magazine, and we started reading it, and I was really fascinated by the things they were saying about the foods, and they were talking about the additives that were being thrown in the food and how that was being done to keep the stuff on the shelf longer so it wouldn't spoil, so these companies would make more money. And at the time, that seemed quite radical to a young teen. You know, I said, how can this guy get away with saying this? I'm surprised that they don't go to his house and lock him up, you know, talking like that, because things were a certain way back then. You know, we believe what our public officials told us, we believe what the government told us, but it wasn't until we went through the tumultuous period of the 1960s that things began to change. People began to question the government and so forth. You know, I remember activists like Dick Gregory and whatnot, and I saw him a number of times speak, and he was also into the health thing. So, you know, it's an evolution of all these different influences. As you live your life, you know, what we do musically is always related to the times that you're living in.
Oh, sure.
You know, you really can't separate it. I mean, we haven't had another era quite like the 60s, but everybody that hears the music of that period is really impressed. And I said, you know, people both black and white were bringing it. You know, compare that to what's happening now. You know, things are very different. It's more laid back. A lot of the free jazz that's happening now, you have the underground influence has crept in, and now drummers are playing drums. And in my opinion, you don't really need to have formal lessons to be making sound or making noise. You know, that's a whole different thing. It has nothing to do, I won't say it doesn't have anything to do with the tradition. Somehow music always evolves and branches out in different directions, and either you're with it or you're not. But I don't think that I will ever really go in that direction per se, because I came up seeing people like Buddy Rich and Max Roach, Tony Williams, and Elvin Jones, a host of other jazz greats, and that influence, you know, I carry that with me every day. You know, it's hard to erase that. And I tell people about John Coltrane. I said, if you have problems getting into his music, just follow his recordings in chronological order.
Exactly.
You know, if you do that, you'll get it. And if you run into a problem, then back it up a few albums and just keep listening. But oftentimes when I go into a music store, I will hear horn players say, I like what Train did early on, but I don't like what he did in the later phase of his life. And that tells me, well, if you say that or think that way, you really didn't understand what he was doing early on.
Exactly.
When you play a musical instrument, you know, music is largely creating certain habits on your instrument. And most human beings are creatures of habit. It's not so easy to discard 20 or 30 or 40 years of playing and say, okay, I'm going to be free. I mean, what does that mean? You're not going to get rid of all that you've studied, you know? I mean, it's still going to be present there. If you listen to Train, even though he would ask McCoy Tyner to lay out and he would be playing with Elvin and Jimmy Garrison, you can still, he's playing chord changes. It's still there. You just got to listen.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah. No,
So
but
what else? Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned the 60s, you know, and I'm always blown away, but you know, that you had a chance, of course, your generation, to see all those greats that you mentioned, you know, from Elvin, Tony Williams, and I mean, like Max Roach and Sonny Rollins, you know, John Coltrane. Like, how was it for you? Who were these initial? What got you into jazz? Basically, I'll ask like that. Like, who were the first sounds you've heard that where you decided, like, shit, I want to do this music? Like, what got you inspired, really?
I came into the so-called free jazz totally by accident. I was in high school at the time, and one of my classmates who happened to be in the band was starting out on tenor saxophone. His name was Rodney Baycott, and he lived in the neighborhood. I think he lived like right around the block from me. I was on 158th Street, and that's the same basic area where they filmed the movie Gloria. Also, Willie Dynamite was filmed on Broadway along that way. And a few blocks over, they did across 110th Street. Also, I think when Cotton Comes to Harlem, some scenes were filmed up in my hood. But a lot of the movie stuff started happening when I was up in Boston and I was going to Berkeley. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So Rodney pulled me aside because we both played in the high school band at George Washington High School. And he was saying, Mark, he said, there's this music I want you to hear. You know, it's new. And he said, you really should be aware of it. You should come to my place and, you know, check it out. And I'm saying to myself, I said, wait a minute, this cat been playing on the horn for 5 minutes and now he's talking about some new music. I said, this is crazy. How can he possibly know what's up or down with music? He just got here. He's still in diapers. So I put him off for many weeks, but Rodney didn't give up. He kept being very persistent. He said, Mark, when you gonna come? When you gonna come? I said, yeah, I get there. I had no intention of going. So one day he asked me and I finally said, all right, already, I'll go. You've been asking for a long time. I'll come to your place this Saturday. Happy now? So I went to his place and when I got there, he said, you finally made it. I said, yeah. What's this music you keep talking about? So he began to proceed playing a lot of the ESP disc recording. So I got to hear most of the catalog of the records that were out at that time. And that's from A to Z, Marianne Brown, Albert Ayler, you know, Patty Waters, whoever was on the label at that time and had made recording, this was my initial exposure to the music. And I'm listening to the music and I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to follow what they're doing. And I'm saying, I'm not getting this, you know, I don't know what they're doing. But that was just the hook to get me into the music. Yeah. So Rodney kept playing all of these records. And when he put on Sun Ra, I think he put on that Sun Ra album, the one where he had his picture with all those historical figures. When I saw that, I just burst out laughing. I said, Rodney, is this cat serious? And he assured me that Sun Ra was a very serious artist. And I said, I think this guy is a kook, you know, he's crazy, you know, he's talking about he's from Saturn. And, you know, he continued to play music. But when he got to John Coltrane, that really cemented it. I think he put on A Love Supreme. And that record really landed on me the right way. And I said, I looked at the album cover and I looked at the picture. I said, now this guy strikes me as a very serious artist. You know, I don't think he would be doing this kind of music. You know, I think you know, I have to really do my homework here. And Rodney continued to play more of the impulse recording. And when I left his place, you know, you could say a shift had occurred in me. And I remember feeling very, almost like high, like I'd been smoking weed or drank alcohol or something. And I said, I have to figure out what's going on with this music. So that began my initial contact with the free jazz, and I began to buy some of the records. And then Rodney would come over to my place where I lived with my parents and my brother on 158th Street. And we would start playing the music, you know. And I got very interesting feedback from some of my neighbors, you know, a classmate, a young lady who was going to one of the same schools as I was. And she said she heard us playing, and she said, when you was playing drums, she said, I thought you were throwing barrels down the stairs or something.
Oh, my.
Which made me laugh. And the neighborhood would get really, really quiet. Almost like they're going, WTF. So that's how I got hooked into the music. And then at this point, I was in my last year of high school. So I spent a year playing with the Warriors Drum and Bugle Corps, because people had been recommending that for the longest while. So I was only able to do the Drum and Bugle Corps thing for like 1 year. And then I went to Boston because I had heard that I had heard about Tony Williams and that he was with Miles Davis as a teenager. And back in the day, that was like unheard of. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like he was a child prodigy, like Mozart or somebody. You know, you had to be really on a whole different level to even think about working with Miles Davis. So that was mind blowing in and of itself. So I went to Berkeley, and that's where I met David S. Ware and also Cooper Moore. Cooper Moore, but his name was, he was calling himself Gene Ashton at the time, you know, but then he later changed his name to Cooper Moore.
Yeah.
But I met Ware, and there was an interesting story about Ware. I was in the Village before I went to Berkeley, and I had seen Miles 2 weeks prior, but he was at the Village Gate. I said, I don't want to see Miles. I just saw him recently, so I didn't want to go. So I kept walking, and out of the corner of my right eye, I noticed a sign, and it said Albert Ayler. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, what is this? So I walked down the stairs, and I asked the guy on the door, I said, is Albert Ayler really here? He said, yeah. He said, yeah. I said, well, how much does it cost? So I think it cost like $3, but I was short on the money. So I pleaded with the guy to let me in, but he wouldn't cut me no slack. He said, come back here tomorrow. Albert will still be here. He's supposed to do a couple of nights here. So I went home, and then this time I had the money. And then when I went back, the guy tells me, he said, no, Albert's not here. He split. So I didn't get to see Albert, but I was very close. Now, David S. Ware told me that he was in the club that night. So he got to see Albert. But I thought it was interesting that fate didn't have us meet in New York, and that we met in Boston. You know?
Yeah.
So that's how that went.
Well, so basically, like Apogee, the band that you made with Cooper Moore, and that started basically in Boston.
That was Apogee.
Apogee, yeah.
Yeah.
That started in Boston, basically. That
started in Boston because we got together. We had to find a place, a rehearsal space, and that took a little bit of time. But Cooper Moore and Ware stayed on top of it. They found a place, and things were very affordable back in the day. Now rehearsal spaces, you know, it's very expensive. You know, I stopped rehearsing my band because of the rising cost. You know, I just don't have that kind of money. You know, I wish I had. I was a member of the Kennedy family or the Rockefeller family, and things might be easier, so I could rehearse and really buckle down and do things that I have in mind. But back in the day, the fees were very reasonable, and we just got a room and we just started rehearsing. We would rehearse like Monday through Friday and have the weekend off. And we did that throughout the summer, and we just worked on our ideas. That's all we did. And we developed quite a bit because we started playing at coffee houses and colleges and sometimes the radio station. Yeah. And that's how we grew. And during that process, people that came to see us talked about us, but we wasn't aware of that. People talked about it, and eventually it landed on the ears of Cecil Taylor. So Cecil Taylor knew about us long before we actually met him, you know, but Ware was the big Cecil Taylor fan, and he would run into Cecil every so often, and he would talk to the cat, and he told Cecil, he said, Cecil, I want to play with you. I want to play with you. And Cecil would tell him, he said, well, you better be ready, you know? So we were ready, but Cecil had not seen us. He had only heard word of mouth about us. So we were in Boston for a few years. And when we had done as much as we could, David and Coopermore and I had a meeting, and we said, you know, we have to move to New York because we've gone as far as we can here in Beantown, and there was nothing more for us to accomplish. Now, during the time I was with Boston, I attended Berkeley, but then I didn't complete my studies. So I needed a JOB. So I was lucky to get a job playing drums in the infamous Combat Zone area. They used to have stripper clubs, you know, right down on Washington Street. If you follow Boylston Street all the way to the end, you would run right into the Combat Zone, and that's where they had all of those various clubs. So the drummer that was working at the 2 o'clock lounge, his name was Fred Wren. Fred was a very gifted drummer. You know, he wanted to move to New York. So he needed he needed a replacement. So at first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to take it, the job. You know, I went down to see him play, and I said, nah, I don't really like the vibes here, you know. But at the same time, I needed a job, you know, you have to eat. So I was more or less forced into it by circumstances. So Ware was driving on Boylston Street, and one night, and we happened to see Fred Wren. I said, Ware, stop the car, stop the car, stop the car. And I ran out and I went up to Fred and I said, Fred, is the gig still available? He said that it was. So I said, I'll take it. He said, okay. So you come down on Monday, you know, and you know, you can start playing. So that's how I hooked up with playing with the organ player at the 2 o'clock lounge. And we would play an hour on, an hour off. And I think we did like 3 sets. Okay. But we were playing like 7 days a week. So that was really great. You know, when you're a young musician like that, you have the opportunity to do that much playing. And the added bonus was seeing naked women. I mean, what's not to like when you're a young man? But that was a trip. I really had to make an adjustment because I come from a very strong Christian background, and I was complaining to Coopermore. I said, Coopermore, I said, you don't understand. I said, I gotta quit. I want to quit this job, you know? I said, I see these sluts taking off their clothes every day. They're a bunch of sluts. They're no good. They're no good. And Coopermore didn't say anything. He said, well, Mark, he said, if you quit your job, how are you going to eat? He said, you need to change your point of view. You're looking down on them. He said, try to see them as human beings. They're just trying to make it like everybody else. So when I did that, then my experience working at the 2 o'clock lounge completely changed. And it wasn't a drag that I thought it was, that I was blowing it up into something really negative in my head, mainly because of the Christianity teaching, you know. Yeah. And I began to relax and relate to them as people, as a person. And, you know, I did that for like a year. And at the end of the year, I think that's when we decided to move to New York City. So this would be around 73.
Okay.
We decided to move. I remember when we talked about moving, I didn't want to move just yet because I had a girlfriend and I didn't want to leave her. So, you know, I kind of dragged my foot on the moving. Ware and Coopermore were in New York and I hadn't moved yet. And Ware would call me up and say, Mark, you got to get down here. You got to come. I said, well, New York is home for me. You know, I'll get there. And then another week would go by and he saw that I hadn't moved. He said, Mark, what are you doing up there? And I know you're not working. You told me you quit your job at the 2 o'clock now. So what are you doing up there? You know, you got to come down here to New York. You know, we got to start playing it. And I said, okay, I have to make an arrangement with my mom. You know, she's going to come have someone drive her up here and get my stuff. So that did happen. And finally, when I got to New York, both Coopermore and Ware were at 501 Canal Street. They were living there. You know, Ware was like on the 2nd floor, and I think Coopermore was on the next floor above. But the reason that place worked is because Coopermore had serious Bob Vila skills. He knew how to do the home improvement thing. He knew how to make furniture. Yeah. He's the one that made the beds and stuff like that and made the place livable, you know. And he also was into making his own homemade instruments. You know, he had those skills. You know, without Coopermore, they would have been just squatting there, living in the room, and they would have been eating and sleeping on the floor. But he's the one that made the tables and whatnot for them, you know. So 501 became very important because we started rehearsing there, and it was a continuation of what we had done while we were in Boston, just rehearsing, getting together. Only difference was you now had more people. Alan Brockman moved in, Ellen Christie, Tom Bruno, and they were the main people that were residing there. And you should talk to Alan Brockman about his experiences at 501 Canal Street, because he said you know how the Con Ed people would come around and they do the meter reading thing? Well, they would come to them, they would ring the bell, and Alan would talk to him because he was on one of the upper floors. They would say, you got to let us in so we can take a reading. He said, huh? I don't understand what you're saying. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And he was doing silly stuff like that. So they were able to avoid being charged for the electricity. Yeah, I thought it was pretty funny. But that became, word got around back in the day, if you had a place where you could play or rehearse, and other cats started coming. And I remember some of the guys that was working with Pharoah Saunders came and they were using the space, and we were like starstruck because, you know, these were working jazz musicians and we were young musicians and they were doing what we wanted to be doing. You know, we were just looking at them all starry-eyed and whatnot. So that went on for a time. And then Ware mentioned that he wanted to do something with Cecil. He said he had ran into him and he was trying to get his phone number, but he couldn't track it down because in New York City, cats do not like to share much information. You know, people ask me, what's it like being a musician? I said, did you enjoy your high school years? That's what it's like. It's like being in high school, a lot of click and like walking through a minefield. You know, you have to navigate and walk carefully, you know, so you don't piss this group off. This group don't like this other set of musicians. These musicians, they hate everybody. This group, they like certain people, and it just gets really, really nutty. But anyway, what happened was I was getting training as a teller because I was working for Manufacturers Hanover Trust. That used to be a bank that used Rod Sterling for the TV ads. And he was doing like a Twilight Zone kind of thing with the bank, you know. And anyway, I was working at the branch on Chambers Street and Broadway. It was right on the corner there. So I was getting training by my trainer, and this guy walks in and I looked at him, and then I do a double take and I said, oh my God, that's Cecil Taylor, you know, because I recognized him from his album covers, you know, so, and his photo. I said, man, that's Cecil. I said, I got to talk to him, you know, but I'm going to have to be cool about this, you know, I don't want to get fired or nothing. So, you know, Cecil got online and waited, you know, after he filled out the paperwork, you know, then he got online. And then when he went up to one of my coworkers, I could tell she was hesitating. She didn't know what was what. I said, Mark, make your move now. And I went over there. I said, I excused myself with my trainer. I said, like, I got to talk to so-and-so for a second. I'll be back. But that was just the context for me to get over and talk to Cecil. So I said to my coworker, I said, so-and-so, do you know who this man is? And she just shook her head. She didn't know. I said, this is Cecil Taylor. He's a famous jazz musician. And Cecil was watching this and he started grinning and whatnot. So I turned to Cecil and I told him, I said, Cecil, David at Ware has been trying to get in touch with you. Is there any way that he can reach you? So Cecil tore off a piece of paper and he wrote his number down and he gave it back to me. So at the end of the day, I went straight to 501 Canal Street. And I gave David, I said, David, this is Cecil's number, call him. And David didn't know what to make of it because he had been trying for days, weeks, trying to get the number. And suddenly I'm just handing him the number like that. It was almost like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, you know, like a midget, you know. So that led to Ware calling Cecil. And then we began to hang out with Cecil. You know, we would go to different clubs and whatnot, and we would hear live music. 1 second, I gotta plug in my, I gotta just plug this thing in. I see the battery's getting low. I don't want it to cut off. I just plug it in, and we're good. Yeah, we're good. So anyway, we started connecting with Cecil, and we would go to different musical performances. For example, when they had the music series at Carnegie Hall. We knew about that concert that was coming up, the one with Rashawn Roland Kirk and all those other musicians that was later released on that Mingus recording. You know, we knew about that performance, but we chose not to go to it. But we heard the feedback, you know, almost immediately the next day. Everyone was saying, oh man, that concert was so great, you know, and they have since reissued that recording and they put in more of the music. So I have both of those recordings, and that, you know, when you're attending live music, you're gonna win some and you're gonna lose some. You're not gonna catch every single one. You know, you just do what you can do. But I was going to the club a lot, especially when I was in Boston at the Jazz Workshop. I spent a lot of time. I spent a week seeing Elvin Jones Trio. He had Jimmy Garrison, and I think he had Joe Farrell playing tenor. And I learned so much from watching Elvin during that week. But another drummer who had a huge impact on me was when I saw Tony Williams for the first time. Miles was playing at the Village Gate at the bottom section. So I got to the club and the band was on break. So I went back upstairs and I was listening to Dr. Billy Taylor, and he had Grady Tate playing drums. And this is before Grady started his singing thing, you know, before he began a singing career. So people had told me that Tony was a very loud drummer. And I thought, you know, I kind of took that with a grain of salt. I didn't really believe them. So I was listening to Dr. Billy Taylor and company, and all of a sudden I started feeling all of these vibrations from the floor. And to be honest, it felt like an earthquake. And then I made the connection. I said, that's gotta be Tony Williams. Everyone told me he was really, really loud. So I rushed downstairs, and sure enough, Miles was on stage and they were playing. But Tony was playing so much drums that night. He was making Miles Davis music sound like it was like Ornette Coleman, but it was straight ahead. He was still laying it in with the time, but he was just so much all over the drums, playing so much stuff. Miles was leaning against the wall, just watching him. And he didn't play that much. He let the band pretty much play. And so after that, you know, that turned my head around. And a lot of what I do is trying to recapture some of the sounds that I heard that night, you know, which is not really quite possible, but I still try, you know, that idea of using a very highly energetic approach. You know, it stuck with me. And that became my template, so to speak, you know, and that's how I like to play. I've even gone on record saying that if I can't play that way, that I would stop playing. But so far I'm able to do it. But now that I'm older, the way that I'm able to do it is I have to do a certain amount of moderate exercising. But a lot of musicians, they don't want to do that. You know, a lot of cats would rather be jealous and all of that of other people, but that's nonsense. You know, all you got to do is put your time into it, and just, you have to really work for it. You have to put in some kind of effort. But we're living in a period right now where people want to be famous and they want to do zero amount of work, you know. And some of these so-called stars, people that are stars out here within the free jazz, I'm gonna limit my comment to the free jazz. We got a lot of cotton candy stars out here. That's how I feel about it. Cotton candy. I mean, I listen to what they play, but it just doesn't have the near the impact that the old timers had. I mean, you know, when you saw Miles or you saw Sonny Rollins, or even if you saw Monk, you know, I saw Monk a number of times, you know, that music would just grab you. You know, what a lot of these people are doing, it just doesn't grab me, you know, it's very light. It just doesn't have any body or substance to it, you know, but yet they have a name and I don't have a name. So it's been a long journey trying to get this so-called name thing, but I focus on my playing. And lately I've been doing some work also with William Hooker, the drummer.
Oh, really?
William.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, he did an album called Symphony of Flowers, and I was one of the 4 drummers on that, because he had himself, me, Warren Smith, and Michael T.A. Thompson.
Oh, wow.
And that was really nice. Yeah, Symphony of Flowers, that's out now.
Okay.
Now, recently we did a recording, and before I continue, I want to acknowledge Richard Gilman Opowski for helping set up this interview. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I acknowledge him.
Yeah.
So where were we?
Yeah, I don't know. No, I mean, I wanted to go a little bit back when you mentioned Cecil, and you know, there's of course Dark to Themselves, like this epic recording now, which was basically recorded 100 kilometers away from me in Ljubljana, back then still in former Yugoslavia. Like, how did that gig happen, and your experience of playing? I mean, it's Jimmy Lyons and the band is killing, you know, like that group and the music, and like, but how did that whole concert happen? And
well, that was Dark to Themselves was the first stop on the tour when we went to Europe. You know, that was the first place we went, and it was an outdoor performance, and we played at night, and I remember feeling cold, you know, but I knew that if I wore my jacket, that I would get overheated. So I played without my jacket. You know, I didn't want to have that happening. But to back it up, before that, when we started connecting with Cecil, Cecil told us he was going to do this perform at Carnegie Hall, and they asked us if we were interested in being a part of it. And of course, we said, yeah. I mean, that's why we moved to New York. We traveled 400 plus miles back to New York. You know, we didn't come down here to say no. I mean, then you're just working against yourself. We recognized that was an opportunity, and we said yes right away. So Cecil began the rehearsal, and the first rehearsal that we were supposed to do was someplace on Prince Street, and Cecil couldn't make it that day, so he had some guy there explaining to the musicians as they walked in that Cecil would not be coming. So that was the first time I saw Charles Tyler, but I didn't really talk to him. I just wanted to play and rehearse. I was really, really focused. But Charles picked up on that, and he was one of the early musicians that was involved with the project. There were a lot of people, and Rick Lopez has a breakdown on his website on the David S. Ware sessionography, you know, who was there. So you can refer to that link. But we had a lot of people come, and basically Cecil would give out the note, because he doesn't give people a sheet music with all the notes on it. He would call out the notes. And if you saw that documentary, all of the notes, they showed his score, and you just see all of these letters and whatnot, which has sharps and flats and whatnot. You know, Cecil knows what all of that means, but I think very few individuals could really put it together and really make it into something musical. You know, Cecil, you know, he had his own way of operating.
Yeah.
So he gave out the notes, and everyone is writing it down. And once they had the notes down, then Cecil would have them play the line, you know, so they would play the line, and Cecil would be listening, and he would say, again, and they would play the line again. He'd say, again, and basically he would have them play it at least maybe a dozen times or something like that. When he was satisfied with what they was doing, then he would give them more notes, you know, and they would be transcribing that. And at the end of the day, some of the musicians, they would go home and they would put it in like traditional music notation if they wanted to read it that way. Some people, they didn't do that. They just left it, you get the letter names and the note, because they knew how the lines went. But basically, that's how the rehearsals went. And we had a lot of rehearsals, because it began in the fall. When was that concert? I believe that Carnegie Hall thing was 75. So this would have been 74, the September of 74. And we began the rehearsals, and we had rehearsals like 2-3 times a week, you know, and the rehearsals would be like maybe 3 hours, something like that, you know, and that was the process. So about 2 weeks before we actually hit, we had a large influx of new musicians that came in, but that was no problem because a lot of them could read, so they picked up on the music right away, you know. But I told people, you know, when you worked with Cecil, you know, the rehearsals were really long, and you would play those lines over and over, that even if you wasn't a good reader, you would pick it up because you played it over so many times. I said, the only way you had a problem was if you were brain dead, you know, that's the only way. Then you got other problems as well, if you're brain dead. But, you know, you played the lines over so many times, it got to a point where I knew all the lines. You know, I knew exactly what to play. And during the rehearsal, early on, one of the rehearsals, I think it was like the third day or something like that, Cecil had invited Jimmy Lyons to come down. Now, Jimmy did not know, I don't think Jimmy knew about us, you know. Because Jimmy, after we finished the rehearsal, Ware and we would start playing that high energy free jazz like we always did with Apogee. So Jimmy was sitting on the couch and he was just nodding his head, digging the music, what we was doing. So when we finished playing, I went over to Jimmy and I started talking to him. And David didn't want to talk to Jimmy. I told David, I said, David, you should talk to Jimmy. I said, he's a really nice cat, you know. You know, some of these cats are stuck up, but Jimmy's not like that. You know, you should really talk to him. So after that, David started talking to him. But Jimmy dug what we were doing. He saw that we were very, very serious and we were focused on the music. And Cecil's reaction was somewhat similar. He had heard so much about us that when he saw us play, it was one of those rare cases where what we were doing was much stronger than the hype, you know, and a lot of cats, you know, it's mostly a lot of talk.
Yeah.
And when you listen to them play, you say, you gotta be kidding me. People raving about this, you know, it's nothing. You know, it's like the emperor's new clothing, nothing happening here. So anyway, Jimmy would come to the rehearsals and he would take over when Cecil wasn't able to make it. Now, Jimmy was very significant to my development as a drummer. We were playing a section, you know, playing with drumsticks, and Rashid Bakar or Charles Down was also there in the group, and he was playing, we were both playing. Then the lines changed, and we were still playing with stick. And Jimmy stopped us and he said, drummers, change it up, you know? He said, play with brushes. And that's when I started using brushes more. And I had heard the change, but for some reason I didn't make the change. I thought maybe if I did that, you know, that I was being weak or something like that, being a punk, you know. I said, no, that was the right thing. That's being musical. You know, you have to change. When the music changes, you should change. You know, you always follow the music. You know, it's not necessarily a straight linear line. You know, you have to go where the music goes. If it goes off this way, you have to be right with that, you know. So that was a significant turning point. You know, I began to use brushes. And then later on, many years later, I added using mallets. And the culmination of my effort playing with drumsticks, brushes, and mallet can be heard on a YouTube video performance I did with Zoe Amber. We did that at Union Pool in Brooklyn, and Don Mount filmed it. And that was really good. That performance is like, I rate that performance like a 10 for both of us, because it was so perfect the way we worked together. You know, I noticed a lot of drummers, they are using that as a template, a guiding template. They're using stick, they're using brushes, and they're also using mallet. So that's nice to see, you know, because you have to always try and blend what you're doing with the particular music. Now, when we were playing on tour with Cecil later on, after we had done the performance at Carnegie Hall, well, when we started playing, the bulk of the audience got up en masse and left.
Wow.
They couldn't deal with the sound, you know. And we wasn't even playing the crazy stuff. We just playing the line. The audience got up.
Wow, man.
They left. Because they had another group one. I have that program. I think it might have been Count Basie or somebody that was on, and they had heard that. And when they heard us, they said, "Oh no!" You know, back in the day, there was a lot of resentment towards the free jazz. I mean, some of the traditional guys, you know, they hated it with a passion. I mean, I can recall going into a room and there were a bunch of traditional guys there. And I went over to where Cecil was, and the look we were getting, I mean, if these guys could have gotten away with it, they would have murdered us on the spot, as if they wanted to kill the music. But you can't kill an idea. you know, but there was a lot of resentment towards this music, you know. That's why Paul Flaherty, when he did that album with Chris Corsano, he called it the hated music. That's exactly right. That's true. That's based on fact. The music was hated, you know, I'm telling you. If things were different, like in that movie The Purge, if they could have that one night, they would kill every last one of us.
Oh, man.
Yes, people would be saying, "Where's Mark? Where's David? Where's Cooper Boy?" Say, well, they're gone. They got killed in the purge last night.
Oh my God.
None of us would be here. But things changed, and I remember in the the 90s? It might have been the late 80s. No, it might have been the 90s. Because I was talking to Bob Ruth of Cadence Magazine, and he said that Jazz Time interviewed him. I said, what? I said, are you serious? And he said, yeah. He said they interviewed him and they featured his CIMP record label, which he had just created at the time. And I said, well, maybe things are changing. And I think things have changed somewhat, but still there are a lot of traditional guys that don't think much of the free jazz artists. And I get it, because they'll say, well, these guys, they don't know their fundamentals, you know. In some cases, that's true.
Yeah.
You know, I asked Ware about it, his thoughts on it, and Ware told me, he said, Mark, some of these cats on the horn, they don't know the difference between a C or a D. And I laughed because I thought he was making a joke. And Ware said, what are you laughing for? He said, I'm serious. I said, oh. I just sounded funny to me, you know. I mean, I would think cats would know the difference. He said, no, because Ware was very well studied. He had connected with Sonny Rollins when he was young, and he would get together with Sonny. And I've heard, he played me some of the cassette tapes that he recorded. Wow. You could hardly tell the difference between Ware and Sonny Rollins. You couldn't tell them apart. I mean, he had mastered Sonny Rollins' sound to a T. So you could hardly tell. So Ware was very well schooled. And he told me, he said, Mark, I've gone through so many of those Italian books, you know, I can't remember them all. A lot of these horn players, they don't have that kind of training. I mean, you know, they have some training, but not the way Ware had it. You know, because Ware had very good control in all the registers, the upper register, the mid, and even in the low. I recall seeing one tenor player, and I don't remember his name. I went to see Pharoah Sanders at Slug, and he let this guy sit in. The guy was extremely well-versed in the low register. I don't know who this tenor player was, you know. I only saw him that one time. But I had never seen anybody else play the tenor saxophone the way this guy did. And he was always in the low register, and he was clean. You know, he really had quite a sound doing what he did. And that leads me to Tony Williams. I saw his Lifetime trio at Slug with Larry Young and John McLaughlin. I said, forget about the emergency recording. You had to see them live. They were so much better live. I mean, the record really, it's just a poor representation of what they actually did. For people that saw them live, they'll tell you, you know, they were really on a whole nother level, you know. And then later I saw John McLaughlin when he left Tony and he went to do his Mahavishnu Orchestra. I saw them play at Avery Fisher Hall at Lincoln Center. And I was in the balcony in the last row, and I could hear them just fine because the speakers went from the stage almost halfway up to the ceiling. They were the largest speakers I've ever seen in my life. So one guy came from the main floor because he said, anybody want to change? I'm on the main floor. You know, you want to change and take my seat? So one young lady said, yeah, I do it. So she made the swap, and she came back about 15 minutes later, she said, I can't sit there. It's too loud. I said, I don't know why you would want to go down there and sit. Because the speakers, you know, if you just look at them, they were going halfway up to the ceiling. I mean, very large speakers. And Billy Cobham was on point. I've never seen a drummer with such a large drum kit play so melodically with the song. And he was right there, you know, to show you he was serious about it. He didn't miss a note. I was really impressed with Billy, the way he played behind Mahavishnu Orchestra. Now, that's not the free jazz, but, you know, I listened to everyone. I saw Monk a number of times. Arnett came up to the jazz workshop. I saw him. I could have seen even more people. I never saw Duke Ellington, and there was a reason for it. My neighbor, when I lived in New York on 158th Street, above me, would play Duke Ellington music every day. So every you know, when I got home after school, I'm hearing Mood Indigo, In a Sentimental Journey. And he just played the same stuff every day. I got to a point, I got sick of it, you know? I said, oh, not again. And I'm trying to do my homework. So I never saw Duke Ellington because I was indoctrinated, brainwashed with his music by my neighbor. But that wasn't so bad, you know. You know, I should have gone to see him when he came to the workshop, but I didn't. But that was the underlying reason. But I saw a number of people, Cannonball Adderley, you know. I mean, that was the place. I mean, I was going to Berkeley. I was studying with Alan Dawson, and he's the drum instructor that taught Tony Williams. So I asked Alan about that. And he told me that Tony Williams was already highly developed when he came to him. So he said he didn't want to interfere with what he had going on. So he tailored the lessons accordingly because he saw the cat had his own thing happening. And I thought that that was a really smart way of teaching, you know. You know, you look at where a student is and you work with them and you tailor it towards their specific needs. You know, that's how you do that. You know, I haven't had the opportunity to teach, you know, I haven't really gotten that going, you know. But we will see. Maybe I'll do that further down the line. I don't know. Right now, I'm just doing a lot of playing. I did a lot of playing last month in April, and I had the pleasure of working with Linda Sharrock.
Oh, really? Wow.
At the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And that was my first time playing in that that venue. We went into the opera theater, and the place was huge. I mean, when we went out on stage, they had the curtains closed. And then when the curtain opened up, I said, oh boy. I said, Mark, you better play. That's a lot of people out here. You can't be coming up short. Not tonight. And I did. We all played well. We all played well. You know, we had Tor Schneider, who'd been with me for many years with Slipstream Time Travel, Glennis Lohman, who works with Dave Peck with his various orchestra configuration. There was Vant Provy on trumpet, Eric Zenman on piano, Albie. Albie used to work with Cecil. I can't think of his last name. I can't say it begins with a B, but Albie is on Facebook. I think you'll find him at Albie on bass or something like that.
Okay.
You know, he was there. And of course, Linda was there. And she is in a wheelchair. We did 2 days of rehearsing. And that was like, we rehearsed Thursday, and we rehearsed Friday, but that Friday rehearsal, that was very intense. I mean, Linda really brought it. I mean, she was doing that vocal thing that she did. I mean, it was really quite something to hear. But we're in luck. Eric Zenman did record that, so maybe Glenda will do something with that further down the
beautiful.
road. I don't know. I hope so, because that was really good. And a lot of people say that they like the performance that we did on Saturday, you know, and a lot of people came there, you know, some of my musicians in my circle. I know Jane Paul Nadian, Brenna Ray, Sandy Ewan, and I hear that Robbie Coltrane was in the audience checking it out, you know. But I've seen Robbie a few times, you know, play. But we have, our history is interesting. I met him when the Knitting Factory was having that What Is Jazz Festival series during the 90s. And I was very impressed with him because I got there, I was supposed to go on at a certain time, so I got there 2 hours ahead. He was there even earlier than I was. He was already there when I arrived. Now I said, now this is interesting. You know, some musicians have a problem coming to places to play and getting there on time. Yeah. Now Robbie is set for life because of his father's name, you know, but he's not acting like an asshole. You know, he's being very professional. You know, more cats need to really tear a page from him and, you know, do things like that, be on time. Yeah. Because, you know, you're costing somebody money, especially if you're doing a recording, you know, I mean, time is definitely money, but recording costs money, you know. Everything used to be really reasonably priced, but, you know, now you got the inflation, and I feel that the inflation is just another excuse politicians use to gouge more money out of us, you know, as if we need that. I mean, they're millionaires and they still want more money. Well, I understand the desire to have more. I mean, everybody wants more of everything, and there's really no end to that. You know, I don't care what it is, whether it's food, power, knowledge, sex, you never get enough. You always want more. It's just the nature of the beast. But anyway, getting back to the music, you know, I'm glad I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different people. Yeah. And there was a point when Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth got involved with the music during the 90s. And he started having people open for him. I used to have a flyer up posted on my wall, but I took all that stuff down. We played at a theater which was right across from the New York Times building at the time, when it was on like 43rd Street or Broadway or 7th Avenue. Excuse me, either 7th Avenue or Broadway. It was the same block where they filmed 3 Days of the Condor, that Robert Redford movie. Yeah. They did a scene along that way. But anyway, Thurston is a big fan of the music. And he did a recording with William Hooker, you know, that was put out by the Knitting Factory. But that's always been a problem area for me. You know, ever since I left to go out on my own, you know, a lot of labels, they don't really seem to want to deal with me, you know, and I don't know why. We're in a different era now. I mean, you would think they would want someone that has a lot of experience and someone who's playing well, but they seem to be, some of the labels that cater to the free jazz, they're leaning more and more in the direction of those who are doing like the underground approach, or the cotton candy approach, as I sometimes call it, you know. But I'm still sitting on the fence about that style of drumming, you know, because it's so different from the way I was taught. Yeah. And you know, I would rather that people focus on learning how to play, you know, learn how to play your instrument, you know. But if people choose to do it that way, I guess it's okay. I mean, there's no skin off my back, but, you know, you're going to kind of limit yourself. Yeah. You know, if you know how to play, I'll give you an example. I worked with Weasel Walter, and he's from the punk and the metal and all of that. And he asked me to join his group, Cellular Chaos. And he told me it was going to be a rock band. And the first thing I told Weasel, I said, Weasel, I know nothing of rock drumming. I just only know the free jazz. And he said, don't worry about it. I'll help you with that, because he plays drums and he played guitar and bass and other instruments as well. So I met Weasel through MySpace when that was happening.
Yeah.
I met a lot of people through MySpace. MySpace seemed to have fallen off a cliff, more or less. Everybody hangs out at Facebook now. But anyway, we met through Facebook, through MySpace, and we did a lot of communicating. So a couple of musicians that know Weasel came to New York, and this group is called Ettrick, Ettrick, and it's Jay Korber and Jacob. I spell his last name Heule. They play alto saxophone, and they also both play drums. And what was interesting to me was that they were both using a double bass drum pedal. And that's the pedal that enables those metal drummers to get that sound when they do, and they do all these insane tempos. I've spoken to some of the metal drummers, and they tell me, oh, I started when I was 8 years old, or I was 10 years old. I said, well, I didn't get started with that until I was a senior. I was 60 when I started doing it. I got a long, long way to go. But now it's a matter of me, you're fighting Mother Nature and you're fighting Father Time, so even though you're exercising and all of that, and some days I have the energy and some days, it might not quite be there. So, I accept that and I just do what I can, but it's fun, and it's another way of adding more color to what I do.
Definitely,
So, but my drumming has gone through different evolution, but you would never hear about it because the media does. I don't know. The media is in a very different place. I don't know what they're looking for at this point. I really don't know. It's different. Years ago, if they had someone playing the way I'm playing, they would jump right on me. A case in point, I'm in 3 books right now. One book is the book that was written by Cisco Bradley, where he's talking about the Williamsburg avant-garde. The second book is Shotgun Seamstress by Osa. I'll spell her last name Atoe. There's a hardcover book, which is a reprinting of all of her zines that she's done. She interviewed me when Cellular Chaos was on tour, and we did a stop in New Orleans. We went to this art gallery, and we were playing behind the art gallery in the downtown New Orleans area where they have all the high-rise hotels and whatnot. Somebody must have complained. The next thing we knew, we had played maybe a couple of songs into our set, and the police department of New Orleans came and told us that we had to stop.
Oh, wow.
So we stopped, we packed, we left, we continued on our tour. Then we went back to New Orleans a couple of days later, and this time we played at somebody's house in their basement. And the editor of this zine, Shotgun Seamstress, also was there. She was on the bill, and she played with her group. So when we finished, they played, and when they were done, we went on and we did our set. And then Osa came to me and asked to interview me right on the spot. So I told Weasel, said, Weasel, this young lady wants to interview me. So he was cool with that. So we went to a quieter place of the house, and the interview was done, and that was published in her zine. Now I'm in a 3rd book. Sonny Rollins someone wrote a new book about Sonny Rollins. I'm mentioned in that book as well. I have to get that. I do not have that in my possession, but I think Richard told me about it, so I will be getting that book hopefully very soon. So it's funny, it seems like things are turning around. And there was another interesting point about the Brooklyn Academy of Music show. We played opposite Archie Shipp. Now, I played opposite Archie when I was with Cecil, and we did a week at the Keystone Corner. So I went to Archie and I told him, I said, you're not going to remember me, but I said, we played opposite each other. I was with Cecil Taylor when we played at the Keystone Corner for a week. And he said he remembered that week because that was really a phenomenal week. Every set we did, for every night, we got a standing ovation after each thing that we did. I have never seen that kind of love before. I mean, that was really something, because I've not had a repeat of that experience, but we were really, really playing, but we had put in a lot of time. When I joined, after Cecil did that show at Carnegie Hall, then I think Andrew left Cecil. So he needed a new drummer. So, things came together pretty quickly. I was able to get in Cecil's unit. Yeah, a lot of cats work with Cecil, but they don't make it into the unit. And that speaks a lot. That speaks volumes about their level of musicianship. But if you talk to them, a lot of cats have very healthy egos. But when you're on the bandstand, it's not your ego people are listening to. They're listening to what's coming out your horn. Your ego can't help you there. You have to do your homework. But like I said, a lot of cats seem like they don't want to be doing that. They just want to be famous. If I had more ego, I probably would be much further along with the music. But I got into stuff like meditation and yoga and whatnot. And that's all very good. I believe meditation has helped me keep me here, and it's helped with my longevity. Without meditation, I probably would have died, I probably would not be here. But anyway, meditation, I tell young musicians, look into meditation because it can help put you in tune with the creative source, and it'll help you to get out of your own way. It'll give you inner peace. And when you play, you can focus on the music. A lot of times when musicians practice, they're thinking about money. How am I going to pay my rent? I don't have enough money to eat. Oh, I'm having a problem with my girlfriend or my boyfriend. Oh, I'm having a problem with some other, mom and dad or somebody else in the family. When I do music, I don't have a lot of that stuff going on. I can focus on the music and just allow the music to flow. That's why it doesn't matter whether I'm doing a live recording or whether I'm in a studio. I'm in tune with that silence, and that allows me to play. But some musicians, the silence is problematic for them. They can't deal with silence, but there is tremendous power in silence, as you very well know. But not everybody can deal with silence. So dealing with music, you're dealing with silence, and music, I see it as another form of energy. And that led me to getting into studying some of the energy healing modalities like Reiki, stuff like that. And that also helps. That's really something that more people should know. I mean, too many times I hear people coming down with various health ailments like strokes and all of that. I mean, if you deal with the energy healing stuff, it can help clear the body pathways and things like that, but people don't know. So, I'm a part, I consider myself one of the so-called new ages, but I keep myself grounded in reality. I know it's not here yet. I'm very concerned about the plight of the homeless people, you know. I mean, I'm wondering when the city is going to give them places to live, but the problem is nobody wants to say, yeah, they want to help the homeless, but at the same time, nobody wants them in their neighborhood, you know. So they have to figure out something. But I know some cities, they've figured it out and they have a workable solution. But music is a long journey.
Yeah.
And you don't know how long you're going to be here. So you really should take care of yourself. You know, don't do too much alcohol and definitely stay away from drugs. You know, some people feel that if they use LSD and all of that, it'll help with their creativity. I say early on, it may do that. But if you keep doing drugs, then the body starts looking more for the high, and it becomes more about the high and less about the creativity. So there was a young lady that wrote a book about that. I forget the name of the book. I went to see her at a book signing, but she had people in there like Fleetwood Mac and other people from that area of the music, and they were all talking about it, their take on it, you know. But drugs, I was never really into drugs, you know. I never even liked the marijuana. I mean, when a friend of mine introduced me to it, you know, I smoked it. I said, I don't like this. And I threw it on the ground. And the guy said, no, 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 no. That's good shit. That's good shit. And he's picking it up and he's smoking it. I said, man, you're crazy. Yeah, I don't want no part of this. Yeah, it's too crazy for me. I'll never forget how I threw it on the ground and he picked it up. He started smoking it. But anyway, it's been quite a life. You know, my journey is not yet over. Yeah. I'm still trying to do more, but I don't know if I'll ever play in another rock band again. But I did 2 recordings with Cellular Chaos, and the first one that we did, that one had been reissued. So I believe that album is just called Cellular Chaos. Okay. So if fans want to pick it up, now would be a good time. I think it's widely available. You can get it. But the free jazz stuff, people can visit my Bandcamp.
It's quite good, yeah.
Marc Edwards and Slipstream Time Travel. That's the one you want to go to.
Just wanted to kind of to ask you for you know, what's going to happen this year? What do you have planned for the remainder? And
right now, I have some work lined up. This month is not as crazy as it was in April, where I was doing back-to-back shows. But, you know, it's like I have a show and then you got a couple of days off in between. You know, it's more of that pace happening this month. So I will be working with different people. I have to actually check my calendar and I can tell you what I have. I will be doing a recording on Monday with Massimo McGee, and he's from the UK. So we're going to be recording. Let's see, that's on Monday. Then on Tuesday, I'm playing at Downtown Music Gallery.
Oh, wow, beautiful.
Bruce Galanta's place. And on that billing is Sally Gates, Total Package. They're the new guys that I mentioned earlier. That's James Paul Nadian, Brenna Ray, and Cosmo Galero. You know, very good group of talented musicians. And my band, Slipstream Time Travel, will be there with, but I won't have the full band. I will be there, David Tamura on tenor, Takuma Kanaiwa will be on guitar, and also Tor Schneider on guitar will be there. And that's on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, this is a back-to-back almost, I will be playing with a trio. This will be Massimo McGee and also Brenna Ray at Stephen Gaucy new series at Main Drag Music. That's on Wednesday.
Beautiful. So busy days ahead. Nice.
Yeah. I mean,
do you have any plans to coming to Europe, by the way? Or
I bet I was in Europe with a trombone player, Dennis Buret. and that was in Switzerland, but that was like back in maybe 2012.
Okay.
He brought us over. But getting to Europe is tricky because you got to have somebody.
Yeah.
You got to have somebody to bring you over. And what the Europeans have been doing for a number of years is they will bring you over and then they will give you musicians to work with. Whereas in the past, they would bring over your band.
Yeah.
They stopped doing that a long, long time ago. So, I'm not really down with that because
Sure.
I'm just not. That doesn't appeal to me. I'd like to work with people, but it's best to have some type of connection beforehand.
Yeah.
Instead of being thrown in a cold
Sure.
situation, because you don't know what you're going to get. And it may not come together.
Yeah.
The way you want. I mean, I have done shows being put in a band, and if you have like a trio, and let's say the bass player is not down with the free jazz,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're screwed. You
Yeah.
really, it's really hard to navigate and make things happen because somebody has taken a stand and they're like
Yeah.
pulling in a completely opposite direction. So
Yeah.
that's how I feel about it,
Yeah.
But I'm happy to see that Zoe Amber is doing very well for herself. She seemed to have, after we did that duel, she just started to rise. Everybody, the media loves her for some reason, and she's doing very well. I think this is a good period for the music if you're a female.
Yeah.
Doors are opening up. Ayumi Ishido is a tenor player that works in my band for many years. She's doing really well. I mean, she's getting recorded left and right. And I think she's going to Japan next month, So I spoke. I think in time I might get over there to Japan, I just have to work on that,
Sure.
But I just do what I can here locally, whatever work I can get, But like I say, years ago, you had non-musicians running a lot of these venue spaces for the music. And the great thing is that they would give you an opportunity.
Yeah.
Now you've got a lot of musicians doing it. And if you have any kind of negative history with them, or if there's something that they don't like about you, whether it's jealousy or whether it's something else, or they don't like you, whether real or imagined, they're not going to give you a chance. If they're running a festival and they don't want you on it, you're never going to get an opportunity. And there's too much of that nonsense going on. That's why I say it's like being in high school. That has to change, because it can't go on. I think what will happen is we're going to start to see some new festivals, and some of these festivals that have been going on for a long time, if they don't change their ways, they're going to lose out to the new one because people will be running it the right way, and that's automatically going to propel their success. They really don't have to do much more than just do the right by the musician.
Yep.
So I'm hoping if we see a change in that, then probably you'll see a change in my status. And I should probably start to get more recognition as a result.
That should happen.
And maybe the record labels will warm up to me.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But, you wonder how much more do you have to do? I mean, I can't play any harder. I mean, I've already done that, so I believe there is a place for me in the music, and it's just taking longer. I'm kind of like Patrick Stewart, the actor. It took him a long time to break through. I mean, he didn't get it till he started doing Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I remember seeing him on Caligula, on that series that aired on public TV. He was one of the actors in that show, and I could tell he had a lot of presence. And I was saying, I said, I haven't. Why are we not seeing more of this man? And he also had a part in the first Dune movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed him. I said, he hadn't gotten here yet, but, hopefully he'll get it before he dies. And sure enough, he gotten it. But I really would like to see this music move to another level where we become as popular as any of the mainstream musical genres, whether it's hip hop or country and western or classical or blues or anything like that. If they start featuring us on TV, we will hook a lot of people. Because I did a show one time. Remember when Michael Dorff did the What Is Jazz series? One year, this was in June of 1999, he was able to get Verizon, which is the phone company, to be a sponsor for his festival. So he was given a lot of money to put on the festival. But before that happened, Verizon allowed the employees to open the festival. And they held part one. It was held inside the building right across from Bryant Park, which was, that building is 1095 on Avenue of the Americas, right on the corner of 42nd Street and 6th Avenue. They held one part there, and then about a week later, they held it at Bryant Park, and the festival kind of followed after that opening. So my band was on that, you know, because, you know, I had applied for it and they put me on it. But I was told the guy that put the festival together was telling them, he said, you guys know who Marc Edwards is, you know, and nobody, of course, in the room, they didn't know. And he told them, I said, oh, this man, he recorded with Cecil Taylor and David S. Ware, and he was giving them the full thing, Charles Gale. And they didn't realize I had such an extensive background with the music. So when we played at the park, I used to have a video of it, but I can't find it now, but I had Sabir Mateen and Matt Hayner playing bass. And we played the high energy free jazz. And contrary to popular opinion saying that people don't get the high energy free jazz, they do. We played in front of that lunchtime crowd and the audience was into it. They dug what we did, you know, and that was really fun to do.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Cool. Marc, man, thanks for sharing some of these thoughts. I really appreciate listening to you. It's like, you know, and you know, I've been a fan of your playing for such a long time, and I hope that means something at least. You know, I have you on so many records, and you know, I appreciate what you've been doing, and you know.
Well, if you ever come to a show, bring some of the records, and I'll autograph them for you.
Oh, thank you.
You know,
thank you.
Now with Cecil and Ware and Jimmy and Malik are gone.
Yeah,
you know. I'm the only one that can give an autograph on that Dark to Themselves album, you know. But that album was literally, that recording put me on the map in the jazz world. And I felt that was both good and bad. I felt that the media reacted kind of negatively to it. It was like they could not connect me to anyone because the prevailing belief was that if you're going to play well in jazz, you have to come through someone. Well, I did, but they didn't do their homework. If they had done their homework, they would have seen that I studied with Alan Dawson. So Alan Dawson was a great teacher. He shaved at least 15 years of unnecessary musical exploration, and I was able to get to where I need to be. And that's how I was able to play as well as I did, but with just doing the work. You know, with David S. Ware and Coopermore in Boston. And also Lenny Nelson. Excuse me. I have to mention Lenny Nelson because I met him in Boston. And he was the one that, after I studied with Alan, he helped kind of like polish my sound, you know. He helped polish it and refine it more. You know, hanging out with Lenny Nelson was really terrific. And he has a lot of videos that he's done of himself playing on YouTube, which is of value to drummers. If they want to do jazz drumming, they should watch some of those videos. You know, he's got literally dozens of them. I don't know how many he had. Maybe it's even hundreds of videos, you know, but he's up in age now, and not a lot of people talk about him. I talk about Lenny Nelson, and Milford Graves used to also talk about Lenny, because Lenny hung out with him when he was up that way. At some point, they connected. I knew Milford, but we didn't hang out that together that much. You know, I would oftentimes run into him when I came into the city, and I would go to the health food place, which used to be, there was a health food place that used to be on 14th Street, and then later they moved further to a different location, you know, but I would run into him and we would be shopping and talking, you know. That was kind of crazy. But he would come all the way from Queens and he would get his stuff, and then he'd load up his car and then he'd head right back out there. But he used to, Ware used to try and get me to go out there to Queens, but I had spent, this was around 81, I had spent 8 weeks in Fairfield, Iowa, doing the Transcendental Meditation City course. It was like an 8-week course. And when I came back, it took a long time for me to get back to normal. And I just didn't feel like going anywhere. You know, I was very stationary. It took a long time for me to break out of that. And David kept saying, Mark, Milford's teaching martial arts over there in Queens, and I know you want to learn it, so we should go out there. And I told David, you know, I just wasn't up to it at the time. But if we had gone, then we would have been included in that documentary of Milford Graves. When he took pictures of that, we would have been in those photos if I had been up to going, you know. And they showed the flyer. There was a flyer they showed in that documentary where Milford did a show in Harlem, and the Last Poets were on the bill. I was at that performance. That was the first time I saw Milford Graves. Yeah, I was there. I mean, that's when my people were really into the music then. It was, you know, but now it's different. You know, now my audience is varied. You know, it's not as many Black people listening to the more adventurous sounds now. You know, there are some, but, you know, they're kind of spread out. But back in the 60s and the 70s, there was a lot more, you know, because that's all part of that Black Power thing that was happening.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Mark, I think I slowly depart. It's so late here that it's I'm fading away here. But thanks so much for sharing some of these thoughts, man. I so much appreciate it. And
yeah,
I'll send you a link when this is out and everything. So
okay,
I usually leave it in whole, and then we can share it.
Okay.
And
you can release it as is, you know.
Yeah, I'll just cut to the when we transition from one.
Oh yeah, right.
I'll leave it in whole. So
I left out that during the 70s, when meditation, Americans were showing interest in yoga and meditation, David as Ware and I used to go see the various swamis and gurus. And we did that. And the direct purpose of that was we were looking for someone to study with because we wanted to learn meditation. But we eventually, Ware told me to read the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda. And that book really made a deep impression on me. I thought I was going to go with that group, but we ended up going with Maharishi's Transcendental Meditation because of they had research showing that meditation was good for the body, and they had all of these statistics. And we said, we're going to go with TM for that reason. You know, I have no regrets. I'm not doing TM now. I've since, you know, moved on to a different group, but I spent about 32 years doing transcendental meditation, you know, but now I moved on to another group. So now I'm approaching almost 5 decades of meditation. So I just continue to do it, and it just gets better and better, and it keeps you it helped me to do the music that I love. And that's my secret weapon. People want to know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. Look into meditation.
Beautiful.
You know, so I urge everyone, look into that. Look into the energy healing modality. You know, Reiki is a good place to start, but just know that Reiki is just the beginning. Energy healing, well, the question becomes how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Sure. There are a lot of modalities within energy healing, and you can really get crazy with that. It's just time and money, that prevents me from doing more. Time and money, as in lack of money. So we can end it on that note.
Yeah, okay, that's a nice ending.